"Get inside first," she urged. The human male was stunned. And then he had a bondmate. Captain Jace Kerrigan had been in space for days, his ship slowly falling apart. The small, battered craft had seen better days. The constant hum of its aging systems and the creaks of its frame were a constant reminder of how long it had been since he'd seen a proper repair bay. He was no stranger to this sort of trouble. It was just part of life for someone like him, a rogue pilot who preferred the open space to the crowded trading lanes of the galaxy. But this time, it was different. This time, he was stranded. His ship, the Ironsworn, had drifted into the orbit of a small, uncharted planet. With nothing but the stars and an emergency signal, he had no choice but to land. He made the decision quickly, hoping to find shelter and repairs in one of the scattered colonies nearby. The planet's surface was desolate, rocky terrain stretching out in every direction. Yet, as he ventured further from his ship, Jace saw something that made him pause. A single, towering structure stood against the backdrop of a storm that was starting to roll in. It looked ancient, weathered stone archways and intricate carvings on the walls, suggesting a history much older than the human race. As he approached cautiously, a soft sound reached his ears, a voice. Not a human voice. He froze, scanning the area. The voice came again, clearer this time. It was calling him, beckoning him forward. "Get inside first," the voice urged, a soft, melodic sound that carried across the wind. "Quickly, before the storm comes." Jace hesitated. The storm was closing in, dark clouds swirling rapidly above. The last thing he needed was to get caught outside, so he made his way toward the entrance. The voice belonged to a woman. She was standing under the archway, her figure barely visible against the storm's encroaching shadows. She had a striking presence, her silver hair flowing in the wind, her golden eyes shining brightly, almost as though they reflected the stars themselves. But what really caught Jace's attention was the strange, almost magnetic pull he felt when he saw her. His heart skipped a beat. "Come," she said again, her voice unwavering. "There is no time." Without thinking, Jace walked toward her. His instincts kicked in, the kind of instinct that told him this wasn't a random encounter. There was something unusual about this woman. She was no ordinary alien. Her aura, her presence, it was different from any species he had ever encountered. He stepped past the threshold of the archway, and immediately he felt a shift. The air was thicker here, heavier, as though the place itself was alive. He turned to speak, but before he could, the woman was already speaking again. "You're here," she said with a soft, almost reverent tone. "At last." "Who are you?" Jace asked, his voice steady despite the confusion in his mind. "And what is this place?" She smiled, her golden eyes glowing brighter. "I am Elira of the Sciencefictionstories. And this is where the bond begins." "The bond," Jace repeated, feeling a cold shiver run down his spine. "What bond?" Elira stepped closer to him, her gaze intense but not threatening. "You'll understand soon enough. You are the one I've waited for. The one the stars have chosen." Before Jace could ask another question, she raised her hand, and he felt a sudden jolt in his chest. A sharp, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't pain exactly, but it was powerful, like something was connecting inside him, something deep and primal. He gasped, trying to back away, but his body wouldn't obey. His mind swirled with confusion and a strange, undeniable sense of calm. "I don't understand," Jace muttered, his breath quickening. Elira's voice softened. "The bond is a sacred connection. It's a union that unites not only our hearts but our very fates. You and I are now bound." "Bound?" Jace's voice was a mixture of skepticism and fear. "What do you mean? How could—" She placed a hand gently on his chest, just above his heart. "It is the way of my people. Only once every 1,000 cycles does the bond find its match. It is not a choice, it is destiny. And you, Jace Kerrigan, are my bondmate." Jace froze, his mind racing to make sense of her words. Bondmate. Was she saying he was now somehow connected to her, spiritually, physically? He couldn't wrap his mind around it. Before he could voice his disbelief, a deafening roar filled the air. The storm outside had arrived, fierce winds howling and rain crashing against the stone walls. But as he looked around, Jace realized the inside of the temple-like structure was strangely untouched by the chaos outside. The atmosphere inside remained calm, almost serene. "I need you to understand," Elira said, her voice firm yet compassionate. "Our bond will protect us. It will keep us safe from the storm outside, from the danger that follows." Jace shook his head, trying to focus. "Danger? What kind of danger are you talking about?" Elira's golden eyes narrowed. "There are those who will try to destroy the bond before it can fully form. The bond between us is not just rare, it is a power that many would kill for, and there are enemies who will stop at nothing to break it." Jace felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Enemies? Who the hell are they?" "They are the Traskari," Elira said quietly. "A race of merciless conquerors. They are already searching for us." The weight of her words settled over him. His instincts screamed at him to get away, but the bond pulsed through him, like an invisible thread tying him to this mysterious woman. It was clear she wasn't lying. She wasn't asking for his protection. She was warning him of something bigger than they both realized. Jace opened his mouth to say something more, but before he could, Elira took his hand. "It is not just our survival at stake. Our bond could change the fate of entire galaxies. But we must stand together. You cannot fight this alone." He swallowed, unsure of what to say. Elira's grip tightened around his hand, and in that moment Jace felt an overwhelming wave of emotions. Fear, doubt, but also a strange, growing sense of connection to her. She wasn't just an alien. She wasn't just an unknown. She was his. "We must be ready," Elira whispered, her eyes locking onto his. "The storm is only the beginning." Jace stood still, staring at her, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions and thoughts racing through his mind. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back. He had been pulled into something far larger than he had ever imagined. And it had started with a simple phrase: "Get inside first." The days that followed felt like a blur to Captain Jace Kerrigan. He had gone from being an independent pilot, drifting through space with no ties to anything or anyone, to finding himself inexplicably bonded to an alien woman named Elira. The bond, as she had explained, was not something he could fight or deny. It was a deep connection that tied them together in ways Jace couldn't fully comprehend. And no matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the bond was undeniable. Jace spent most of the first few days in the temple-like structure, trying to make sense of everything Elira had told him. She was kind, patient, and more than willing to explain the bond's significance. But the more she spoke, the more Jace realized how little he actually understood about his role in all of this. He wasn't just some stranded traveler. He was now the central figure in a cosmic connection that could change the fate of entire civilizations. He had no idea what to make of it all. Elira had told him that the Scifiaudii, her people, were an ancient and wise race, one whose destiny was intertwined with the stars themselves. For centuries, the Scifiaudii had waited for the right human to bond with, a bond that would bring balance to the galaxy. And Jace, for reasons he still couldn't fathom, was that human. He had always been just a man, a pilot, someone who wanted nothing more than to fix his ship and move on. But now, the weight of a universe rested on his shoulders. The strange connection between them only deepened as time went on. At first it was subtle, a shift in the air when they were near each other, a slight pressure in his chest when she was upset. But soon it became something more. Jace could feel her emotions, her thoughts, like they were his own. He couldn't explain it, but when she was anxious, he felt the same tightness in his chest. When she was calm, a wave of peace washed over him too, and there were moments when their thoughts seemed to blend together. Jace would think something, and a few seconds later, Elira would say it out loud, as though she had read his mind. It was both comforting and unnerving. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the rocky horizon, Jace found Alira standing at the edge of the temple, staring out at the landscape. She seemed lost in thought, her silvery hair catching the light of the dawn. She had always been calm, composed, but today there was something different in her posture, something guarded. He approached quietly, not wanting to disturb her. But before he could speak, she turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his with a piercing intensity. "You're beginning to feel it, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Jace didn't need to ask what she meant. He nodded. "Yeah, I can feel you, your thoughts, your emotions. It's not like anything I've ever experienced." Alira smiled, a sad, almost wistful smile. "It's not just a connection, Jace. It's a bond, a sacred union between us. It is the will of the stars." Jace frowned, trying to understand. "And what happens now? What do I do with all of this?" She turned back to face the distant horizon, her eyes distant. "That is what we must figure out together. The bond is more than just our shared connection. It has the power to change everything. But first, we must protect it." "Protect it?" Jace repeated, his voice growing serious. "From what?" Alira's eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and determination. "From them, the Traskari." "The Traskari," Jace muttered under his breath. "Those enemies you mentioned." "They will stop at nothing to destroy the bond between us," Alira said, her voice unwavering. "It is a power they cannot control, and that terrifies them. If they break the bond, they will throw the galaxy into chaos. You must understand, Jace. The bond between us is not just personal. It is a force that can shape the future." Jace looked out across the land, his mind racing. This was bigger than just survival. This was about something far greater, something he wasn't sure he was ready for. He had no desire to be a part of some prophecy, to become the center of a galactic struggle. But he didn't have a choice. He was already in this, and there was no turning back. As the days passed, Jace began to learn more about Alira's people. The Scifiaudii were an ancient race, far older than humanity, with a rich culture and history. They had long believed that their destiny was tied to the arrival of a human bondmate, and now that the bond had formed, they had no choice but to fulfill their part in the prophecy. Alira was not just any alien. She was a leader of her people, a woman with great responsibility, and she was now bound to Jace in ways that neither of them fully understood. The more time Jace spent with Alira, the more he realized how different she was from the other aliens he had encountered. She was wise, yet there was a vulnerability beneath the surface. Despite her strength, she carried the weight of an entire race's future on her shoulders. And as much as Jace tried to deny it, he felt the pull of responsibility too. He couldn't just walk away from this, no matter how much he wanted to. One evening, after a long day of trying to repair his ship, Jace found Alira sitting alone by a small fire outside the temple. The stars were bright above them and the air was still. There was a quietness to the moment that felt almost sacred. Alira looked up as Jace approached, her golden eyes meeting his. "I know this is difficult for you," she said, her voice low. "You were never meant to be a part of this. You were just a man, a pilot, but now you are part of something much larger than yourself." Jace sat beside her, staring into the fire. "I never asked for this. I never asked to be some bondmate or whatever you call it." "I'm just trying to survive out here, Alira," she nodded slowly. "I understand, but this bond is not just a connection between us. It is a responsibility, and it will change you. It will change both of us." Jace stared into the flames, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always been a man who lived for himself, who relied on no one but himself. Now, he was tied to Alira in a way that he couldn't escape. He was no longer just a pilot, no longer just a loner. He was part of something much bigger, whether he liked it or not. As the night grew darker, Alira stood up, her gaze never leaving Jace. "We must be ready. The Traskari will come soon, and when they do, we must be prepared to fight." Jace stood as well, his jaw set in determination. "I'm ready. Whatever comes, we face it together." Alira nodded, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. Together, and for the first time since he had met her, Jace felt a sense of peace settle over him. The bond between them was real. And though he didn't fully understand it yet, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't face this battle alone. The days were growing darker for Captain Jace Kerrigan and Alira. After the storm passed, the planet's surface settled into an uneasy calm, but the peace was fleeting. Every moment they spent in the temple-like structure seemed to bring them closer to a confrontation they weren't fully prepared for. Jace had come to terms with the bond. Though it still felt strange at times, he had learned to accept it. It wasn't just some connection that linked him to Alira. It was a force that now guided every decision he made. He could feel her thoughts, her emotions, and at times even her fears. And in return, he shared his own. The bond was not just about survival anymore. It was about their fates, their future. But the more Jace understood, the more he realized how dangerous it all was. The Traskari had begun their hunt for them. "They'll come for us soon," Alira had said one morning, her voice tight with worry. "I can feel their presence in the air. The Traskari will stop at nothing to tear the bond apart." Jace's mind raced. He had faced danger before, but this was different. The stakes were higher. It wasn't just his life that was on the line now. It was Alira's, and it was the fate of the entire galaxy. They couldn't hide forever. Jace had to fix his ship, and they needed to leave this place before the Traskari found them. The ship, the Ironsworn, was his only ticket out of this mess. But he had underestimated how much damage the storm had caused. The engine was shot, the fuel systems were fried, and there was no way to power up the ship in its current state. "I can help," Alira had said, her eyes glowing with determination. "The Scifiaudobooks have ancient technology. I know how to repair your ship, but it will take time." And so they worked together. Jace focused on the mechanical systems, using the limited tools he had on hand. Alira, with her advanced knowledge of alien tech, helped guide him through repairs, teaching him things about energy systems he never thought possible. Their bond made it easier to work together, despite the pressure mounting on them. But even as they worked, they knew time was running out. The Traskari were relentless, and Jace had a bad feeling in his gut that they were closing in. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Jace heard the unmistakable sound of ships approaching. His heart raced. "Alira," he whispered urgently, "we've got company." She turned to him, her golden eyes sharp. "It's them." The ground trembled beneath their feet as the sound of the Traskari warships grew louder. Jace's eyes darted toward the entrance of the temple. There was no time left. He needed to move quickly. "Is the ship ready?" he asked, his voice tense. Alira nodded. "It's not fully repaired, but it will fly. We'll need to make a quick escape, though. I'm not sure how long we can outrun them." Jace didn't hesitate. He grabbed his blaster from the table and handed one to Alira. They made their way to the ship, their hearts pounding with urgency. When they reached the ship, Jace immediately began working on the console, trying to start the engine, but nothing happened. The systems were still offline. Alira crouched beside him, her fingers flying over the controls. "We can override the main system. It's not a perfect solution, but it will work." "Do it," Jace ordered, glancing at the sky. He could already see the Traskari ships descending, their massive forms casting long shadows over the land. Alira's hands moved with practiced speed, her eyes glowing with concentration. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Jace breathed a sigh of relief. "We're good to go," she said. Jace didn't wait a second longer. He jumped into the cockpit and strapped himself in, his fingers dancing over the controls. The ship's systems flared to life, and with a burst of power, they shot into the sky. The planet's surface quickly receded beneath them as they broke through the atmosphere, but the Traskari weren't far behind. "We need to lose them," Jace muttered, his eyes scanning the radar. The Traskari ships were fast, but he was a pilot. He could outrun them if he could just get enough distance. Alira's voice came through the comms. "I can help. Trust me, Jace." Her words sent a wave of warmth through him, and he didn't question her. They were in this together, and her bond had already proven to be more powerful than he had ever imagined. As they rocketed into space, Jace maneuvered the ship into a series of evasive loops, dodging laser fire from the Traskari ships. But no matter how fast he flew, they were still gaining on them. It wasn't enough. "Get ready," Elira said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'm going to give us an edge." Before Jace could ask what she meant, the ship jolted. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Elira had activated a hidden SciFi device, one that distorted the ship's energy signature, making it nearly invisible to their enemies. Jace watched as the Traskari ship scrambled, trying to track them. They fired wildly, their blasts missing by mere inches, but the cloak was working. For now they were hidden. "We have time," Elira said, her voice calm, "but we cannot stay cloaked for long. The longer we keep it active, the more unstable it becomes." Jace nodded, his focus narrowing. He had only one chance to get away. The Traskari would never stop hunting them. "We need to find a way to jump to hyperspace," Jace said, his fingers flying over the ship's controls. "But I'm not sure the hyperdrive is going to hold." Elira placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding him. "You can do this, Jace. You're a pilot. You've always been able to do the impossible." Her confidence gave him strength. He was a pilot and he had faced impossible odds before. This was no different. With a deep breath, Jace punched the hyperdrive controls, praying the ship could handle it. The engines roared as they surged forward, and for a moment, everything felt like it was happening in slow motion. Then with a burst of speed, the ship shot into hyperspace, leaving the Traskari ships behind in a streak of light. Jace leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. They had done it. For now, they were safe. But Elira's voice, filled with a deep sorrow, broke the silence. "This is just the beginning, Jace. The Traskari will never stop, and neither will the others who seek to destroy the bond." Jace glanced at her, seeing the fear in her eyes, a fear he hadn't fully understood until now. The bond they shared was powerful, but it was also a beacon. A weapon that could change the galaxy, and there were those who would stop at nothing to destroy it. As the stars stretched out before them, Jace knew one thing for sure. Their fight had only just begun. The hum of the hyperdrive was a constant in the background, a low, vibrating pulse that kept Captain Jace Kerrigan grounded in the present. He stared out at the endless expanse of stars, their cold light distant and unwavering. For the first time since he had bonded with Elira, he felt a heavy weight settle on his shoulders. The bond was real. It was undeniable, and it had changed him. But now, as they drifted deeper into the galaxy, far from the Traskari and the planet they had barely escaped, Jace realized something else. The danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. Elira had remained silent for hours, sitting quietly in the ship's small observation deck. She gazed out into the stars, her golden eyes fixed on something only she could see. Jace knew she was troubled. She had always carried the weight of her people's future on her shoulders, but now that burden was heavier than ever. He stood up from his seat, pushing himself away from the controls, and walked over to where Elira was seated. He could feel the familiar pull of their bond, a subtle thread that connected them in ways he still couldn't fully understand. Her thoughts seemed to brush against his, and for a brief moment he felt her anxiety, the fear of what was to come. "Elira," he said softly, "what's going on in your mind?" She didn't turn to him right away. Her voice was quiet, almost distant. "I've been thinking about the choice ahead of us. The Traskari aren't the only ones after the bond. There are others, factions, who would do anything to control it." Jace frowned, concern flickering in his chest. "Control it? What does that mean?" Elira finally turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "The bond between us is a weapon, Jace. It's a force that can change the galaxy, bring about peace or destruction. And there are those who believe they can harness it for their own purposes." Jace felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had never imagined that something as simple as survival would lead to something so dangerous, so pivotal. So what now? What are we supposed to do? Elira's gaze softened, but there was a determination in her eyes. We can't run forever. We have to face the truth. The bond we share is not just our connection. It's a symbol, a key to a much larger destiny, and we must decide what to do with it. Jace's thoughts raced. He had never been one to get caught up in prophecies or destinies. He had always been a man who lived for the moment, one mission after another, but this was different. Elira wasn't just any alien. She was the key to something much bigger than either of them. We have a choice, Elira continued, her voice steady. We can run, hide, and try to stay out of their reach, but eventually someone will find us. Or we can make a stand, use the power of the bond to change things, but that comes with its own risks. Jace looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. And if we make the wrong choice, Elira hesitated for a moment before answering. The consequences could be catastrophic. We could lose everything, our lives, our freedom, the future of both our people. The ship shuddered suddenly, pulling Jace out of his thoughts. He glanced at the radar. A new set of ships had appeared on the edge of the system, their signatures unmistakable. The Traskari had found them again. Looks like we don't have much time, Jace said, his voice tense. Elira stood up quickly, her golden eyes flashing with a mix of fear and resolve. No, we must make our choice now. The Traskari will keep coming, but we cannot keep running. Jace clenched his fists, the familiar sense of battle stirring inside him. He had never been one to back down from a fight, but this was more than just a skirmish. This was the beginning of a war, one that would determine the fate of more than just two people. We'll need to get to a safer place, Jace said, his mind working fast. Somewhere they can't track us so easily, Elira nodded. There is a place, an old HFY stronghold hidden in the far reaches of the galaxy. We can seek refuge there, but it is not just a safe haven. It's where the true power of the bond can be unlocked. Unlock it, Jace repeated, his confusion growing. How and why now? Because the time has come, Elira answered simply. We can no longer run. We have to stand and fight for what's right, or the galaxy will fall into chaos. The bond between us is the key to stopping the factions from exploiting it. Jace knew the decision had to be made. His instincts screamed at him to fight, to defend what he had come to value in a way he had never imagined. But the reality of what lay ahead was daunting. He was no leader, no savior. He was just a man who had stumbled into something much bigger than himself. All right, Jace said after a long pause. Let's get to that stronghold. It's time to take a stand. Elira nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. We do this together. No matter what happens, Jace. We are bound now, and we will face whatever comes. With a deep breath, Jace fired up the ship's engines, steering them toward the coordinates Elira had given him. The stars blurred as they shot through hyperspace, the tension between them palpable. Jace could feel Elira's emotions through their bond, and he knew she was just as conflicted as he was. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future of everything. As they approached the hidden HFY stronghold, the atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. The place was an ancient, fortress-like structure, buried deep within an asteroid field. Its towering spires and hidden entrances were designed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding void. It was a place that had been untouched by time, preserved for this very moment. But as they neared the entrance, Jace's radar lit up once again. More ships. This time there were too many to outrun. The Traskari had found them, and they were closing in fast. Jace's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared for the worst. They had made their choice. Now there was no turning back. Prepare for battle, Jace said, his voice cold and determined. It's time to make them regret ever chasing us. Elira stood by his side, her hand on his arm. We fight, Jace, but we do it for something greater than ourselves. And in that moment Jace knew. No matter the outcome, they would face it together. They were no longer just two individuals thrown together by chance. They were a bond, a force, and nothing would stand in their way. The time had come to choose their destiny.